shortly, 'cause I know John's got to leave early. And what I'd like to do, John, I should just tell him we're starting, is because you're leaving early, is there anything you'd like from the agenda that you'd like to focus on?
Not in particular. I glanced through all that material. It's fine. Go ahead and pursue the agenda.
Okay. We have the minutes. Anybody have any corrections to the minutes that Mike wrote for our last meeting? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve? Motion to approve. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Morning.
Good morning, Diane.
We just started.
We just started. I put out a calendar. The idea here is a proposed meeting schedule to get away from having special meetings, so that we have regular meetings. Apparently, there's different requirements about when the notification will go out automatically, but also when the agenda has to be due and all of that thing. These were stated for Thursdays, and the reason they're stated for Thursdays was because during the summer we thought that Fridays might be more difficult for some people who were taking time off or traveling. There's also something that may happen within the town hall, which maybe makes Thursday more likely in the future. There's a lot of meetings. It's every other week, which is what we have here. But obviously, we've been busy here in the first part with programming and the siting of the building. I don't know whether we're going to be as busy later on when they start really grinding slowly through the various designs. But we've listed them here anyway. We can always say, skip that meeting, whatever. This is just to have a... So, does anybody have any other questions about the schedule or objections to it other than it's 7:30 in the morning? I told Katie that what Diana's told me is that SLAM would prefer to come down early in the morning to avoid traffic. So it seems like not only to accommodate our commuters, but also the architects when they have to make a presentation, the earlier time sounds better. Everybody agree with this schedule? We should adopt this schedule? Okay, so these won't become regular meetings, I'm told, but until 30 days from now, something of that nature. I'll get the language from Kate and from Linda. Okay, the next part I wanted to go into was the key takeaways from our application with the state grant. And Rusty and Diane could comment on this, but the key thing that I thought came away from all this was that we, at the last minute, we've been talking about changes to the ed specs, and when we finally made the filing, we decided to stay with the ed specs that were approved in the prior September, not because we are endorsing them all or we didn't want to change them, but because I guess their time requirements to make sure you had adopted any new ones was such that we didn't have enough time to get them all approved and crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's, so that we submitted our plan, our state grant application with the existing ed specs, but obviously we've been talking about them for the last 6 weeks, or not 6 weeks, 4 weeks or so, and we'll be looking to changing some of them. We're recommending that. Other than, and the state is aware that we reserve the opportunity to make changes to the ed specs. We blamed it on the new superintendent, but we basically bought some time. And they didn't seem to be disagreeing on that, did they? Were there any other takeaways from the...
Just a couple of things. In our second meeting up there, they confirmed the fact that we can go over their budget, which is based on a model which is probably not relevant to start with. And that's okay to do that, except for we just have to pick up 100% of the cost of the incremental amount. And that's a different policy than they've been operating on. He did tell us that, but that was the first thing he did, was to say, so there's no, they're not going to shut the project down or reject the project if we're old. I thought that was important. And secondly, they really did seem to be flexible and willing to discuss stuff, and in an obtuse way kind of recognize that the model that they're using may not be appropriate. and
Outdated?
it is outdated, and Chuck talked to him afterwards, and it was good to hear that they were very willing to work with us because they sort of trusted us as opposed to maybe some other municipalities which try to milk the cow a little too often, so.
Yeah, and they mentioned a situation where people come in with their application and everything meets within the standards, and then they start changing everything, and they said, wait a minute now, don't do the bait and switch on us. And they had some problems with some school districts where they didn't maintain their schools well. And so they were concerned, okay, we give you the permission, or we grant you money to build this, but in 15 years or 10 years, you're going to come back and say, well, we got to redo this. And they didn't like that. And so, but I think they felt we were a better, we were a district that took care of our properties. So that helped.
It's great.
And they took into account that the ELP was a change, and they would provide something, since we're bringing all the ELP into the one site and making the ELP program, or we're projecting it to be larger than it is today.
We did make a promise to be much more diligent than many of the municipalities in getting the paperwork. Because we'd had asked them, hey, we've heard all these stories, how you don't get reimbursed forever, and they use the example of change orders, that they're getting change orders 10, 12 months after they happen. There's no need for us not to get it up the same month.
The new the new finance director that will be on board probably toward the end of the summer, early September, very familiar with the state process, has been through several construction projects and stuff like that, so that was good to hear.
Yeah, and as I understand, that the administration has to be submitting the documents.
Correct.
For reimbursement. And we can have them, we can approve the invoices to be paid, but looking for reimbursement, that has to go through the district. It was also interesting to note that pretty much every step of the way going forward, we're going to have to go back to the same state group to review our schematic drawings and a budget, then design development drawings and a budget. So, it's kind of a constant review process. Even though they may not give us that much money, it's still, it's their, they feel they have the power and the right to at least review all of that stuff.
But you're feeling pretty confident that we're on top of the process and you understand how to navigate all that? It looks good.
They said that.
They said even better.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't feel comfortable about any of this stuff, John. It's massive amount of different moving parts.
Did we get
Is there any
additional-
immediate next steps?
Pardon?
Is there any next steps?
We actually need to set up a meeting. I guess we still haven't done that. We need to communicate with them and set up a meeting this summer. I
With
think.
they want to meet Dr.
With-
Adley.
Including the superintendent.
Okay.
That's what they want to do. They want to meet with him. They know him, but they still want to meet with him. And I'll ask Slam today whether they made the reservation or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that might be an appropriate time to discuss, any changes to the ed spec. Right, we need to come back, propose any changes to the ed spec to them. And that might be an appropriate time to do that.
I looked at my notes, Diane, and I think I specifically said that if we were going to make ed spec changes, the recommendations, we would come back to them no later than August.
Yeah.
So that's still in the time frame. Okay. Which I think falls within our programming work that we're doing.
Definitely.
Any additional color on if the DLC program that occurs at Oxbridge might be something that is counted in a different way?
I don't know yet. Do
Okay.
you have any information on that?
Slam seemed to suggest that there may be, that may be looked upon favorably, and whether it's factored into the sort of bonuses that they give at the very end of the process or not.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure, but certainly he felt the state would look upon that favorably, and we should emphasize and really present that.
Okay, so it might not be part of like a
Right.
formal formula, but certainly something that we could.
Present as part of the
Highlight.
conversation. They really like to see that we're doing things town-wide.
Right.
And that's an example of that, and certainly anything that I think helps, it supports one of those programs for for those types of kids, where
Great.
they'll look upon favorably.
Yeah, what's very clear is that any bonus money comes at the very, very end of the project. So then, for the last, I guess we started in mid-June on what they call programming, which is basically taking the ed specs and then reviewing them and creating box spaces and adding up all your spaces. These are for the ed specs, and making recommendations. Now, we've had 3 meetings, and what I sent out last night was the result of the last meeting. And there's a lot of things we could discuss in there, but here's what I want you to focus on, is the fact that by our next meeting, August 1st, I believe that is, I'm going to ask SLAM to come in to our meeting, give their recommendation as to what changes they would say to the ed specs. And so this committee should then be familiar with the documents, the programming documents that you've seen so far. Any questions, please, let's talk it up. We have information back and forth, and any additional information you need, if we haven't given it out, we'll make it available. But so that by our next meeting, Sam will make a presentation and recommendation, and we should then either approve, disapprove, we should then decide what we're going to recommend to the Board of Education to change in the ed specs that they've sent to us. To give you an example, for the gym, they called for a room that would have accommodate 530 people in the ed specs. There ain't no such room in the building, nor would there be designed. So the question is, what do we do to accommodate that or get close to it? That's just an example. They didn't, when they did the ed specs, they did not have the second psychologist, which has now been approved district-wide. So we have those kind of changes. Some of them minor, some of them are more substantive. But if there's anything that you people would like to add to the programming efforts, it's quite detailed.
But we're looking to SLAM to actually come back to us with recommendations as to either how to accommodate some of this stuff or ed spec changes they would
Ed
recommend.
spec changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of, Luke has been here at all the meetings, and providing very good insight as to why we're doing this or why we're not doing that, and making changes. A big example, for example, he reduced his office size.
I was gonna say, that's a little tight. I'm thinking 450 square feet.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, we went through, and a lot of those things were discussed. Classroom size, flexibility in classroom uses, all of that kind of stuff was discussed. And it's been incorporated now into this last document that you got last night. But there should be more verbiage, and there will be minutes of that last meeting developed shortly.
And SLAM had taken our ed specs and done a red line of it for an earlier meeting for discussion. And they seemed comfortable with providing recommended edits to our document, which we can review and approve, and I think that facilitates the Board of Ed approval as well.
And
I
do
think
their
the-
ed spec changes go directly to the Board of Ed for
Correct.
review, or is that something we can see first?
After we decide, we're doing a lot of back and forth with SLAM, and we had Luke here talking to them, why we should keep this or not do that, or we should change that. That's been all the debate that we've had here. So they'll come up at the end of the session, which will be next session, to say, okay, hearing what you've said to us and all that stuff, here's what we recommend. And then the committee will then say, yes, we agree on this, we don't agree on that, whatever. And then we will make a recommendation to the Board of Education to change their ed specs.
Do you have enough time to get that approved? Because we have to get it up to the state in August.
Yeah. I have to see when
Thank you, Fran, sorry, I gotta go.
Take care. Good luck on it.
Thanks, John.
just looking to see when the August meeting
In general, I feel SLAM's done a really great job, as you say, in our design subcommittee review meetings, analyzing the program and coming back with some good recommendations.
Yeah, well, it's also very helpful having the right people in the room at the time to be able to answer the questions, you know, or say why it should remain this way or whatever, or why it shouldn't be changed, which was very, very helpful.
We may have to figure that out. There's only one Board of Ed meeting in August, and it's the 27th, just because of vacations and holidays.
All right, well, if it slips a little bit our time, well,
That makes it tight, and I don't know if we could, I mean, we can always try to call a special Board of Ed meeting, but then that's based on how many people are there, and I would think that's the type of meeting where most people would want to be there for
Yeah.
voting on
oh,
changing
yeah,
ed specs.
oh, yeah.
So,
And when is
boy.
your next meeting in, that's your next?
so then we go back to a regular schedule in September, so September we have the 10th and the 24th.
And is there any remaining meeting in July?
Yeah, there's a meeting in July on.
We won't be ready for July.
Yeah, there's a meeting on the 29th. That's the last meeting for July.
29, what's today?
18th.
So today's the 8th, yeah.
And
That
there's-
meeting's on the 11th.
Because then that's,
what's the next step?
Our meeting's
I
11th.
mean, Slam's got to review this stuff.
No, I wanted the committee
Right.
just to see this stuff.
on August
Thanks.
1st, right?
And, but I wanted you to see it now and to look it over and to be able to ask questions from now until August 1st. And Slam will come in on August 1st and say, okay, we've heard everything, we've gone through all this, having heard everything, here's what we would recommend that you do. And then the committee has to say, yes, we agree, or we don't.
Can we back that up by a week and make it next week, July 25th, instead of August 1st?
We can ask them when they're here today. I just don't know whether they're going to be able to swing it that
Right.
fast.
Don't want to get off on the wrong foot with the state, as we told them August.
Right.
Wow. Well,
So we can poll and see how many people would be around for a special meeting for the Board of Ed.
That would be the easiest, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Slam's, that area of their work is pretty much complete.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we've had 3 meetings and we've kind of worked through that. I would
definitely
Right.
check with them, but they're updating their documents in the meeting, so I would be surprised if it was too much.
well,
Yeah,
I would,
I
you know,
feel the
we
same
didn't
way.
get the minutes of this past meeting, which is kind of, I was hoping to have that. In addition to the, you know, the document. Amy puts together the minutes and she doesn't,
But I
They actually
almost wonder
came
if
in
that's
last
not
night.
part of
no,
the.
that was,
It followed up, I believe.
Yeah.
after the June 27th meeting, that's all I got.
There was another email last night.
Yeah. I almost wondered if that was intentional, though, that the minutes came right before the next meeting, so that might be something that we could ask for.
Yeah, I think it's that they were preparing for an important meeting today. and
Right.
Put that, made that less a priority.
She sent out the 6/27 meeting minutes last night.
I got, yeah,
Yeah,
but that's,
those.
I'm looking for the ones from
Right.
7-Eleven.
7-Eleven.
Right, that's on the.
Yeah.
So the only thing I would recommend, and we can talk to them about it for the Board of Ed, is at the end of the ed specs, there's a Excel spreadsheet that has every room, square
Right.
footage. I think from a visual and just easy to talk to, that's the document that should be updated or redlined in terms of this room's going to this square footage, to this square footage. We're adding a room here. I think the verbiage itself is good, but I think people would rather just see it in a.
And this is what they did. They,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they
Yeah,
took,
yeah.
they took that same chart and
Okay.
they did
Yeah.
that redlining as well.
Got it. Yeah.
But again, this is interim, so we want to get to
Yeah,
where
here's
their
the
final
thing.
recommendation is, and then what to finally decide.
How rigid or how much flexibility is there with regards to the, you know, the pretty precise square footages laid out in the ed specs? And what I'm thinking about is when they actually go to site this building and deal with all the constraints, they're probably going to have to make some accommodations here or there. Is that something where there's like 0 tolerance for deviation from this? Or you have to go through a lot of hoops in order to do that? Just trying to look out in advance. I think there's likely you're not going to be able to accommodate every last item because of the way the site's going to lay out or the difficulties of terrain, whatever it is.
That wasn't my understanding, like what they're putting in the presentation that they said, like the way, like that will determine how they lay out
Hell or
the
high
building.
water, they're going to make this exactly work.
I think
Okay.
that's at the minimum.
At the
I think
minimum.
Those are minimums.
Okay.
So you can bet that it won't match up.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
But I do think that those numbers are informing their design.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just curious if there's like any deviation, if it trips a bunch of wires, kind of politically or with the state or.
Well, classroom size is a big thing.
Yeah.
And we discussed classroom size and why it's 900 square feet, is it? Rather than, they were talking about 800 and something or other.
Okay.
And then it provided the flexibility going back and forth between DLC and regular 1 through 5. So, you know, there's been a lot of discussions about that.
But they haven't started to
Draw a
plot
building.
this out yet?
No.
Or remember all the different versions they showed us?
They can do it real quick with a CAD.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it doesn't mean it's what it's.
Although I think that the program is certainly informing the building design as it's evolving. I mean, they're certainly looking at building design right now for the purpose of
Okay.
citing it.
Oh, they are? Okay, good.
Absolutely, and they know exactly, you know, where the kindergarten wing is and where the administration is, and they've kind of given those areas enough square footage to accommodate our ed specs.
Have they gravitated towards a option?
Well, that's the
Today.
big part of our discussions.
Oh, that's today.
Well, I mean, trying to figure out the siting of the building starts to determine what the shape of the building will be.
Sure.
And the siting determines the phasing, determines the length of time to get, you know, all of these interplay, which is part of the complex conversation.
Because then the phasing will determine a bigger conversation with Luke and the administration about, do we need portables, do we need swing space? What are
Right.
the costs associated with that type of stuff?
Exactly, all of those things. I mean, everything sort of,
Yeah, and to your point, as we go through this and all of a sudden, to me, that would be a big miss if we shovel and ground, oops, we can't do this, but any change to the ed spec has to go back to the Board of Ed. So
Well,
even as they start.
If it's six square inches off. on a
Well, right,
plan,
it's like administration
Within
office
reason.
must be 500 square feet, and they're like, this lays out at 480, you know? You know? Okay.
we'll have a special ruler to measure these things, which will be which will adjust to whatever we want to call it.
Whole Board of Ed will be there with their ruler.
No.
Their yardstick.
So I have another question on this diagram here that's kind of a summary.
Yes.
With the different, as I look at it, I wonder if this is kind of trying to take a look at the forest. Is this proportion of uses, I'm curious how it compares to the building today. Now, this is different because ELP consolidation here muddies it.
That's all over here.
Right, what page is that?
This is the very first page.
Okay, so, but is this to scale, first of all? I would think with an architecture firm, they probably did it relative to scale.
To one
They
another.
try.
Yes,
Yeah,
to one
so-
another.
So I'm
yes.
thinking, like, is this, especially to Luke, like, does this seem proportionate? I mean, as I look at this, special ed is probably 2/3 the size of a consolidated town-wide ELP. You know, you've got a certain amount of dining as a percentage of gross square footage of the property. Are we, you know, does it feel right in the sense of like programming relative to what's being utilized today or what's, you know, and what you know to be off from today, and then maybe compared to Tokenique or other schools around town in the
Why don't you
sense
go
of,
chair?
does it seem like it's trending from a big macro picture perspective in the right proportion? Or are we designing something fixated on an ed spec, and then you look at it later on, and you're like, what the hell are we thinking? This is gigantic and disproportionate to the use.
I think that's been, I mean, the one meeting I was at and what I read, I mean, I think that's been where we've landed because of the process.
Okay.
I think they've kind of enlightened the ed specs and made a visual out of the ed specs that makes sense. And then with what Luke has contributed, to me, that's how
Awesome.
I think it's, if you go to Tokenique, there's a lot of lessons learned from
Lessons
Tokenique
learned.
as what didn't work there and what
Yeah.
you shouldn't do there.
great.
So we-
And I'll let Luke speak, but my behind the
You feel good with
scenes,
it?
yes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the architectural firm has been terrific in terms of challenging us appropriately and saying, you know, does this make sense? And here's relative to the trends in the state, here's what the state might reimburse or might raise an eyebrow around. And we've been able to, have that conversation back to say that these are the needs of our school, this is the vision of where we're going. So it's been a very dynamic conversation with them about what we need, and I think to your point about proportions is the lunch space, 3 times the size of learning areas in the classrooms, we've been very mindful of making sure that those, ratios make sense for the actual use. So it's a good question.
Cool.
Yeah, we had
That's great.
three meetings to discuss programming, each was about 3 hours.
Yeah.
And we went through the entire program, I think 3 times.
We did.
Literally,
Okay.
box by box.
No, but
It's been
No,
vetted
literally
well.
box by
But that
box.
doesn't mean you shouldn't look at it closely and
Yeah.
ask questions.
No, absolutely,
The
yeah.
same was also, I think, quite formulaic about when they took the ed specs and say, okay, you're asking for this, so that means this size of classroom will give you this many spaces, and not saying that you will lay it out, but here's an example of the type of furniture that you could fit and
Right.
what this is going to allow for. And then they would also come back and say, you could also, with your classroom, you like to keep your student number at this, we could achieve the goal with this. And then we had quite a bit of back and forth as to what our goals were and where we could cut certain spaces in order to give, priority to other things that we were looking to add.
Right, and to your credit, they did come back with furniture plans in every room.
Yeah, you'll
Which is incredibly
see
valuable.
those.
Yeah,
And-
that's cool.
And discuss the detailed use.
These aren't final, these are just suggested things to
Right.
make sure
And
that
this
it
all,
works.
this all has embedded expansion capability in it, because that was all in the enrollment projections.
Well, we've got some definitely in there, which is taking the DLC space and using it for 1 through 5. And that's what you see when we get to the diagram, which has the
Classroom.
the classroom space. These two are swing spaces
Okay.
because they could come from DLC. And that's why we said keep them all, even the DLC, at the same size, even though the DLC would probably be a little bit oversized at
That's right.
900.
That's right.
Okay. But is there, we still have to look at the flexibility issue. There's no question. I mean,
But that has been something that's come up again and again.
Yes.
How can we design this to be flexible when we have a bubble, when we have,
Yeah.
this grade has a larger section number than.
I think the learning too was in the common space or the gymnasium or the cafeteria where you said, hey, we want 300 people here, 400 people there, 500 people there. They took it down to, well, here's the reality of it based on the square footage per chair, per seat, per,
How much that
body
would
in the
take.
seat. And that,
Yeah.
we sit here going, 5,000 square feet will give us 500 people. Well, actually, 5,000 square feet will give you like 180 people.
Wow.
When you break it down into the.
350, wasn't it?
350, when you break it down into
For the
the.
fire marshal.
It took-
Aisles and egress.
Okay.
But right here in the very front, the second page of the document after, they mention that the objectives are to provide flexibility for bubble in the enrollment. So I think they've been pretty good at that.
Another thing that comes to mind here is seeing the gross square footage exceed 100,000 square feet. That's a tripwire on the traffic study process, not the traffic study, the traffic approval process. So we just have to be mindful of that, maybe in the Gantt chart. I'll go back and revisit what that step means.
Okay, but remember this, what they're doing to get to that number, which is the.
They're grossing it up.
The 109,000 square feet.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're saying, okay, look, everything we've done here in these block diagrams is net square feet. That is to say, interior space only. We haven't allowed for corridors, bathrooms, that is, regular bathrooms rather than special bathrooms. We haven't allowed for walk-in areas, a whole bunch of other stuff. We haven't allowed for the width of the
exterior
of the
walls,
wall.
yeah.
And so what they do is a quick check mark is used, the 62% number. Now, that's up to us to whittle that down when we actually design the building and work on the adjacencies and everything else, so we can squeeze that number down, and so we don't come up, so I don't know where we're gonna
Okay,
come
where
up.
we'll land, but it's close. Okay.
Right now, it's pushing on the
Yep.
on the number, no question.
Okay.
But we have,
Premature to.
Too
figure
premature.
the track.
Yep.
For the 3 meetings, everything is now incorporated in that document. I know they're gonna redline the ed stuff, but that's what
the ed
they're
specs
working
were
on.
redlined originally, that's where they started. And if you haven't got a copy of that, I'd be happy to get you a copy of that. That was where they
But
started.
for the meeting on August 1st, they'll use that document,
Yeah.
the one that was been distributed.
Yeah, it's possible, there may be edits to it. That was a document, if I'm not mistaken, that was presented at the beginning of the meeting, of the last meeting.
This has been edited.
Yeah.
And it's possible there might have been slight edits based on our conversations at the meeting. I don't think there were much.
Yeah, the rhythm has been, every time we've gotten back together, they've given us a new iteration of it, so I'm hopeful that when we see them shortly today, they might have here's version.
Slight edits of this one here.
No, this one just came out.
The one from last night, okay, so that's it.
This one, just, the one I sent you, or that was sent out to you, is the one that came out last night, so it hopefully has
Okay,
all
that
the
is-
changes.
And it
Yeah.
has an updated, has a
We
new
did-
date on it.
We did vote on, and I presented those red line changes at the last Board of Ed meeting. The issue was those minutes were not going to be available, hence the back and forth and just going. And we knew there'd be more edits to those documents.
Okay.
But
Well-
but a lot of that stuff has been vetted with the board already.
Well, that's good. I mean,
Exactly.
so what we should do then is, when we get ready to make our recommendation as a building committee,
Right.
make sure, I know what, we want to know what you guys,
Yes.
the Board of Ed has already said
Yeah.
okay to, so we have less things to worry about. Or less things to.
But that blessing is not enough to now go to the state. I mean, you need a,
There's more changes.
There's more changes. We want to get them all, we want to get them all in.
And we've asked SLAM when they've said yes to kind of synthesizing that all for us, making it in a data table, making it, bottom line.
Which is that data table I was showing you before, which will be updated for this, for our final.
At the end of the day, we're not really taking away from anything.
right, so it's,
It's growing. I know. Anything else we should add about the programming
Good questions.
at this point?
I would say that just one of the things that we really had to figure out was in the ed specs, there was a request for a gym, a cafeteria, and a common room, which has sort of been, it's a bit of a point with the other schools, who has what, and how do we orient things. And I do think that SLAM was very thoughtful about really like being patient with us and talking through what are your options, what is this gonna do to your bottom line, you know, that your overall square footage, and what is it that you're looking to accomplish, and how can we do that? So there were really good conversations about like, well, how often do you have 6 grades together versus 3 grades, upper grades, and 3 lower? And one of the slides in that deck, they laid out, okay, this is what you're asking for in your ed specs, and like, here's, you know, sort of through our discussions, what we're proposing you might be able to accomplish.
It's a bubble.
So this, I think, was a really good visual of it, sort of explaining like, this is what you came to us with, and this is what we might be able to accomplish, which I think will be important, even sort of to helping the population, the town, understand what type of school we're building and what we're gonna accomplish in these spaces. So that was just one more level of,
Yeah, the key thing I saw, or one that struck out at me, was the fact that the lunchroom was designed, or with the space to basically go from 6 waves down to 3 waves, which is great, I think. I would think every parent would like that. But, you know, there's room to do it. And so it would shorten the lunch period.
so that comes with added layers of
Oh,
things that would need to be figured out from a district level.
Okay.
Just saying.
because of the other school.
Right, and staffing and just all of that, since Oxbridge doesn't run our own cafeteria separate from the rest of the district.
Right, well,
it would just
and we're
be-
going to have that, as I remember, we're going to have a meeting with the.
Debbie.
Your food service person and their food service expert, so all of that, you know.
Everything's been looked at very carefully. I do think that we've
Yeah.
gone through.
Okay.
Bring your lunch.
Yeah, and I think to Katie's point, along with that is the conversation about the gymnasium in the ed spec, and I think that's the biggest size change that we are faced with, and I think the Board of Ed's already had that conversation, but increasing the gymnasium to a middle school sized gymnasium, which will also give the school a gathering space, which will hold more students, to kind of satisfy both those needs in that space, rather than looking towards the cafeteria for the gathering space. And I think they really, again, were very patient with us and talked it through and wanted us to make that decision. And I think as a group, we felt that made the most sense.
It made sense, and along those lines, in addition to potentially freeing up some space for the high school to have a larger gym, that they could have some of their training sessions
Right.
at our facility, And even for potential town use, I know that there was some conversation about would P&Z, or excuse me, Parks and Rec want to use it, so.
It's the YMCA.
YMCA.
The YMCA is the biggest user of apparently basketball space.
Which is good.
Yeah. They were apparently very excited.
Very excited.
Well, tell them just to contribute money. I
Get
think.
the,
Write that check.
Bring a check. That's right.
Well, by the way, to that point, I was told that they actually had offered money to help pay for a larger gym at Tokenique, but we're told explicitly when they offered that we can't do this because all of the gyms have to be equal. The schools all have to be equal. But at some point, because we've talked about this before, that concept, I think it was maybe during the presentation from the architect of Tokenique. I forget the name of that firm. But I think we're past that, and the response was that I think the town philosophically now views potentially this project as like setting the standard, so to speak, for future projects, and it's not something that you have to basically constrain the design of this just because of what exists at other schools. But that was interesting that the representative from the Y told me, he said back then we actually offered capital for that. So if anyone wants to make a phone call.
Okay.
Just kicked off their own
Other
fundraising
funding?
and capital campaigns.
Okay.
There's no detention room? I mean, not that I would know anything about that.
Our next item, and we'll ask Slam whether they can, and we'll check again about the timing of the BOE meeting.
Yes.
But we'll ask Slam whether they could do it 1 week earlier. We'll see. Now, our contract negotiations.
Sorry, one question. Was the Tokenique tour ever
It's going to be
scheduled
this
for
afternoon.
Slam?
Yeah.
Oh, it is,
Yeah.
okay.
We've got it all coordinated with Karen and I believe the reps from SLAM. So this afternoon, I don't know if that's, stealing the thunder of SLAM, but Karen gave me a call yesterday to organize for us to head over to Tokenique after our session this morning.
It's great, because they wanted to do it. They wanted to see what the issues were.
So I said, I'm happy to take you all over there, and we were doing interviews there yesterday. Mary's not, the school principal there, Mary Michaelson's not in, but I've already coordinated with her, so we're good to take a look at whatever is useful.
Great.
So that's at 12,
Yeah.
right around 12. And I think if any of the committee members was available and wanted to join that tour.
Those who haven't seen it.
Yeah, show you around.
Our contracts, we've been, embarrassingly, none of us have really gotten into it this week, that Patty Gogg has gotten back to us. So we have to work on that. We will work on that, right, guys?
Yeah, well, we got it
We'll
on.
row this
we got
boat.
it- We got it on Monday, so we got it.
No, we'll row this boat. We have to get these contracts done. I don't think there's anything huge in them. It's just a question of going through all the
I need to
details.
just sit down with Kim.
Okay.
So on that note, though, Russ, you're in receipt of the latest revision from Patty Hawkins?
Yeah, this was Monday.
We got that
You
Monday.
got that Monday, didn't you?
Yeah,
And that's the latest?
Yeah,
that's the
201.
latest, right.
Okay.
But that, none of that's been discussed with
Right.
SLAM, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that just has to be
We-
checked out.
And we got to wade through it.
And are we waiting on anything else from Patty at this point? Is that,
No.
we
No, I
got
don't
both
think so.
documents, both the
Yes.
architect?
Yeah.
It's up to us to get through it and have our comments ready and then sit down with SLAM and ONG.
Yep.
Okay. And then today, we're going to start the process of figuring out siting of the building on the property and the construction phasing and all the other things that follow from that. This will be they want to have, that is SLAM has said they would like the siting to be determined by the middle of August, because they do not want to do schematic drawings of two different possibilities. They'd like us to come down to by the middle of August, which would be obviously, that's about 4 weeks from now. Okay. So it depends upon how much we get done this afternoon, how much more we can get done, whether in the interim, if they're going to come down. presentation next week rather than 2 weeks from now, and try to get this whole thing resolved. Jeremy Ginsburg will stop by. I've asked him to stop by at this meeting just to give everybody a full picture of what's going on with regard to the zoning of the MU zone and the R2 zone, and what kind of process that means. Who do we have to go get approvals from, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're working on today. And Diane was kind enough to put together a list of criteria, at least possible criteria for what issues we face on siting. I think it's pretty comprehensive. And does anybody have any questions or additions to that particular area?
Well, I mean, just at a high level, from the presentations, what I understand is phasing or no phasing as like a key issue. And I think what I heard then was if you do this in a phased approach, you add 10% to the money, to the cost, and you add a year. Is that still the understanding in these options that are being discussed as like, because those are kind of like binary things?
It's not actually that simple from the beginning.
Really?
Like the siting is really about over here. And if over here, then phasing, and if over
Right.
here. But
There'll be some phasing no matter what.
But I don't think it's a question of, do we want to go with the phased option or not?
It's not?
I don't think that's the first question. I think the question is like, where do we want the building to sit, and how are we going to, what type of design are we going to put in?
Okay, because you have an L-shaped site, if you go here, you get it a year faster. If you go here, you get it a year slower.
But that's
right?
oversimplified also, because the phasing also allows some portion of the building to be available faster
during-
even than a non-phase.
during.
The very first cut, and remember, we don't even have a design yet.
Sure.
But O&G sort of added, I think, 6 months. They didn't add a year, they added 6 months to the
Okay.
process. Again, on a very rough, if you're gonna do this and that.
Yeah.
And that was based upon, if I remember, 3 separate phases of getting the job done. When we met after our last programming meeting, they indicated, this is SLAM, that they were looking at maybe some siting that would reduce the number of phasings down to maybe 2 or 1 major phase and then a smaller phase afterwards. They've always talked about, since they're building the ELP for the entire district there, that may come as a secondary, come after the opening of the K through 5. We have a goal that we said we want to have that K through 5 open and ready for students August of '22.
Yeah, and I think that's been integral to to each design, that the ELP will follow by 6 months. I mean, that's a little up in the air, but by less than a year.
But we're going to hear a
than
lot
couple
more
months.
about that today in terms of what they thought about
Some period.
And I do
period.
think the other question that was raised to us at the last design review meeting was whether we would be open to potentially having more portables on a short-term basis as a way of possibly reducing a phase in the project, to shorten the construction project and speed everything along.
But these
So,
would be
and-
portables that have bathrooms and all that, so they're not the.
Right,
just-
and again, very short term, just for the construction, and potentially to make the site safer, I think, for the school and students during construction. So we agreed that that's something we're open to and we're willing to discuss. So I think it is a little bit more complex than just sort of phased or not phased.
It sounds like it's trending to the existing site.
I think most things are pointing in that direction,
Yeah.
but I think it's really important. The cost is a big issue with
Right.
regard to that as well. Yeah.
I got a long message from Andy Ashforth yesterday. I followed up, but he wasn't there. They're very concerned about the complexity of trying to put all these phases together and want to be sure that SLAM is looking at alternatives other than just the first 2, the more favorable designs that they put forth. And if it means, okay, throwing them away for a minute and looking at it with a fresh eyes, particularly in light of the MU zone, they should be doing that. Because he is very concerned. He used the example of the New Canaan High School, which was a phased project. He said it was a nightmare, a nightmare.
And I should say, though, that all of these meetings on the siting, ONG people will be here. It's not just SLAM. So that we're getting the people who have to actually do it, which makes a great amount of sense.
Yep.
And I believe a representative from AP will
Yeah.
be at the meeting today as well.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. Yeah, because they actually have to be the people doing it.
They're the hammer and nails guys.
So the document that I distributed, I think, has a number of criteria called out, and they all have different value and all have different weight, and I just wanted to raise them so that we have a series of different criteria by which we evaluate different options, and not forget, certain aspects of the design that are important to consider.
I think it's comprehensive.
Well, it's hard to not start getting into the building design. I try to keep to the site design, but it's intertwined
Is there anything more to discuss on that right now, other than the fact that we're going to be going at this pretty hard and heavy? All right. Anything else to bring up today? Again, if you need any, if you feel that you haven't received some information on the programming, check with me. I'll make sure that you have it. I think you tried to make sure everybody has it. Some of it is redundant, as you can tell. I mean, for example, from the first meeting, the results of this from the first meeting to the one we just got, things have changed. I didn't feel compelled to give you the first ones. I have the minutes now of the first two meetings, which you can review. We don't have the minutes for our meeting on the 11th, which is the last meeting we had, so I think it's worthwhile having all those minutes to look at.
Randy, was there anything more that was worth discussing with regard to the town
Feedback on
needs of
fields?
gymnasium or fields?
Really, it was very, so I've talked to Parks and Rec, lacrosse, Little League, the Athletic Foundation, the Y, and the Soccer Association. Generally speaking, the comments were, additional accommodations for field use at Oxbridge were really unnecessary. For lacrosse and field hockey, they just use turf. Soccer is really going to be looking to use the Highland field and getting permits there. Parks and Rec is fine with the tiny tots use that they currently have. That'll be easily accommodated with whatever field we use. I still have to reach out to football and to the youth commission, which does their summer camp, but I'm assuming that the feedback's going to be similar to that, whatever fields we're going to be able to provide. One bit of advice from the Athletic Foundation was to kind of take an approach of whatever a lot of the programming that we just talked about is all just the building itself, but it doesn't take into account, parking area, field area, and everything else as they lay it out that may box in as well. But the advice was to essentially lay out different regulation-sized field options when they're citing things out, and to see like what you can actually fit. Because if you could fit something that actually, was a regulation size, like lacrosse field or something, like it would be good to know. But again, generally from everyone that I've spoken to, there wasn't any kind of like pressing need for an accommodation.
And you had mentioned with the gym in an email, I think, that there were some recommendations as to what their needs might be as far as like bathrooms and water. And
Right.
Is there also maybe outdoor facilities that should be provided with regard to that, or is that sort of over and above what is needed? I mean, I guess generally are they going into the school when they shouldn't be, right there?
Well,
and you probably would know the best, sort of what
right,
their needs
exactly,
are.
yeah. Like what happens at the annual picnic, for example? I mean, when people have to use the restroom, I forget, like, I've been there a million times, like, would people just figure it out?
We hire a custodian for the day, and we keep the facility unlocked. So that
Okay, you can go in the building, got it, okay.
That's what the open space woods is for.
Like a golf course?
Oh, does Walter Schock still use the school, I think?
No.
They don't use it.
No, a couple years back, I've never.
So that was good news.
That is,
but, you know, and
the regulation fields.
and pitch,
That's a good thought.
flat, you know,
Flat.
camphor, surface, all that type of stuff, obviously.
Not common on that site.
Right.
Well, what takes priority, obviously, are the bus lanes and the park, and drop-off and all of that thing,
Certainly.
which is critical for safety and all of the things that go on the regular activity of the school. So, nothing else. Our next meeting is going to be tentatively the 1st of August. If we have an earlier one with SLAM, we'll talk with them today and see what we can do. And then I'll coordinate with Duke, whether the Board of Ed. I mean, if they've already gotten down the road with a number of these ed spec
Yeah.
changes, then maybe it's not quite so.
I'll pull the minutes and circulate them.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
You got it. So moved.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.